Yifa is a Chinese Buddhist nun. She was ordained in Fo Guangshan in 1979. And in 2003, she was bestowed an award by the UN for being an outstanding woman in Buddhism, for promoting the rights and freedoms of religious women. But she's not only a nun, she's also a scholar. She studied law. She got a law degree in National Taiwan University, has a master's in comparative philosophy from Hawaii University, and a PhD in religious studies at Yale University. And since then, since 1996, she's been engaged in scholar work of all kinds, that being teaching in different universities worldwide, or writing articles, writing books, translating sutras, and even organizing academic conferences through Woodenfish, which she founded in 2002. It's a nonprofit organization whose mission is to bridge the East and West through cultural and scholar inquiry. And the flagship of Woodenfish really is the Humanistic Buddhist Monastic Life Program, which has been running for almost 20 years now, and brings students from worldwide to experience monastic life for a whole month. And that's how I got to know Venerable Yifa in 2017, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the structure of today's event, so we're going to have some questions with Yifa first, and then we can have a relaxed Q&A with the audience.
Okay, sure.
Yes. Okay. So the first question I have for you, Yifa, is, well, Buddhism has experienced huge changes since the 20th century and until now, and you've witnessed plenty of them. But one aspect, which is often overlooked, is that of women and Buddhism. So in your opinion, regarding the rights and freedoms of Buddhist women, what progress have you seen since you became a nun, and what still needs to be done?
Okay, well, thank you so much. Good to see everybody here, and then have me to share with you my experience as a nun. I was born in Taiwan, and I meant to become indeed as a politician. So I went to law school, and the final goal is to become the first female president in Taiwan. However, during the first year in college, it was like a 1979. So I went to a temple, and I do meditation, and also I learned about Buddhist philosophy. And after 2 weeks, then I shaved my head, and I joined the order and become a nun since then. Right now, it's 44 years now. The background during that time in Taiwan for Buddhism, especially for Buddhism, they were a movement. It's called humanistic Buddhism, or what we should, kind of make it more exactly, more accurate to say it's more like a social engaged Buddhism, because for Buddhism, many people will be considered it should be like the monks and nuns should live in forest, in monastery, and cultivate themselves. However, in for we call the Chinese Buddhism or East Asia Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism, because the reason I throw all this term because though it's not very accurate to if you come to this single term, but however, it's so much emphasized not just cultivate yourself, but to benefit other people. It's more like a altruism, like to benefit other people. So I was very fortunate to contact with this kind of Buddhism, because for me, I don't want to be kind of live very selfish just for myself. I would like to serve the public. So at that time, Taiwan was so-called the Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana means a great vehicle. That means you can take more people from this shore to the other shore. It's more like a a cruise, not just a raft. Okay. So, and during that time also in Buddhist community, they try to recruit more young people, you know, and most important thing is during that time, the Buddhist leaders in Taiwan, they did not suppress women. So that means, for example, the Foguangshan I joined, that I can tell you 90% are women, you know, are nuns. And then almost more than 90%, the head of an institute were in charge by nuns. So I think that kind of an environment allow for the women to kind of have another, you know, women usually what we call have like a glass ceiling. However, if you come to another community like Buddhism, you allow the women to exercise, to have, I think they also have an education. So I was able to send by the master, the temple, to United States for further education or advanced education after I graduated from law school. So my experience being like a woman in Buddhism, I have a great education. You know, I'm not trying to, you know, brag, but I think this is very important. You know, I went to the law school and then went to Hawaii University for master, and then Yale for PhD. And right now, I myself is located at Harvard. So I'm an associate at the Asia Center. So if I want to, because I know that we still have a more question. So if allowed me kind of to summarize, I think there was all the conditions there. The first one, in the environment, that during that time, the Taiwan, the Buddhism in Taiwan has a movement in process. It's called humanistic Buddhism. It's a social engaged. So encourage young people to join the Buddhist community and to serve the society. For example, if during that time that I feel like a Buddhism, I have to kind of retreat myself, isolated from society, I don't think I will join. Okay. And the secondly, I think the leader, especially male leader, it's very important to have education. That means have the equality, gender equality. So never suppress the women's like a capability or their you know opportunity. So I was very fortunate that during that time, that my teacher, Master Xing Yun, allowed the women to continue to have an education. And third one, I think it's very important for women to recognize that the education, knowledge is a power. So, and never look down yourself. Sometimes I feel there was like a women's voice, even within a Buddhist community, that they will say, oh, we women have a very, a bad karma, or women should not receive education. Or sometimes, when we face some of the issue, like, some of the guru, they have a sexual abuse, the female follower. And it's so surprising for me to hear that even for the female member in the temple, they will even blame on women. So I think this kind of education for women to kind of more like a self-confidence. And then I think social movement is very important, but I think the education, provide the education to the women even more important. Okay, so Pablo, that's for the question one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, since becoming a nun and studying in the U.S. and so on, you've had extensive contact with Western life and also secular life, both in Asia and here in the West. So when I chat to my friends and with my family about what I've done with you, and living in Chinese Buddhist monasteries and so on, I often get the question, but what does it really do for you? What can you bring home? So the next question is, well, what can Chinese Buddhist monasticism offer to the day-to-day of the Western secular life? I'm sure you have a lot of things to say here.
Yeah. Well, even though, I spend lots of time, like still study in law school 3 years and then come to United States for master and for the PhD. So I kind of engage with the secular world, especially in academics a lot. However, though, when I was in, joined the order, I have a very intensive, monastic education. For example, we have to wake up like in the morning, 4 o'clock, okay, and doing all the meditation and chanting, and also most people think about doing being a monk and nuns is just sitting there with your eye closed and meditation. That's not true, because we also have to help with the building the temple. So we involve with the construction, or at that time we don't even have a gas. We use like a wood, so we have to chop the wood and cooking. So it's basically it's dealing with your daily life, okay, and serving the food, and not only that, and also you have to kind of follow all kinds of rules, and in basically is a seminary training. So I want to say, from that monastic training, what I realized will be the self-discipline. I know when I contact with the Western student, one thing they don't like it is talk about discipline or preset. Okay. However, that the self-discipline, indeed, it's the foundation for you leading to your concentration. It's good for meditation. And not only that, I think this kind of a concentration come out from a self-discipline. It's very good for your career. I know that even in sports, the athletes, there was some coach you have to teach it these athletes about like mindfulness. For example, like a Brian and Kobe. I talk about like a mindfulness training. So this this kind of self-discipline, where it's probably very hard to find in nowadays in campus in our university, but I think it's the monastery can provide, especially why we create the Woodenfish, like to bring a college student to the monastery. I think this is very important when they're growing up and they're going to face their career, their relationship, and a social issue. I think that this kind of a self-discipline, and of course, Pablo, as you know, that you come to the temple, even though we spend a lot of time on meditation, but in Buddhism, we have a so-called the 5 practice, daily 5 practice. The first one is a morning chanting, evening meditation, and 3 meals. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's also practice, because you have to learn that how can you eat with a mindfulness and with a humble humanity, and then also humanity, and also like a grateful, and also be spiritual. So there was almost like in every day, every moment you have the way to train yourself to be mindful, to be with the mindfulness. And secondly, I think that what monasticism can contribute to our society. If you look at the Buddhist history, especially like during Tang Dynasty or 12th century, that was my dissertation. I focused on the monastic codes during the 12th century in China. And during that time, that there were so many public monastery, and they accommodate over 10,000 people there, monks and nuns and lay people there. And how can you manage in this such mass, population? And Buddhism has their wisdom. For example, if you go to the temple, you see the bell, you see the drum, you think why they strike the bell, they hit the drum. It's not just music. Basically, it's just like a clock. During the ancient time, there was no clock. So we call the monastic life, it's a morning bell and then evening drum, because you hit the drum, you hit the bell when the assembly in the community, when they hear, when is the sound of the bell, you have to finish your kind of what you were doing in your daily routine. So I think that of course I cannot go too in detail, but I believe that the Buddhism, monastic life and the wisdom for the kind of a monastic life has a lot of can contribute to management, if we talk about management. And third one, I think that as I mentioned, that in the monastery, even though you have like 10,000 people living there, and Pablo, you also know that no matter how many people you eat in there, it was so silent, not a sound at all. And the miracle thing is that you also can feed, a temple can feed more than 10,000 people. And how can it do it? I think that nowadays our problem is we always want more than what we need. And the monastic life is take care your need, but not let you indulge in what you want. I think this is because now, maybe next one we will talk about environmental issue. And the way we create lots of problem or a crisis to our environment is because overconsume too many things is unnecessary. So I think that we can get from the wisdom and the experience from, I should say, I'm not sure I should say ancient, even the modern, but I think this kind of ancient wisdom as well. Okay, so I think that for individual, you learn about self-discipline, and for the kind of a organization, you learn about management, and then for our society, I think that we can kind of tackle with this over consumerism. You can all learn from Buddhist monastic life experience. Yes.
Yes, I think what you're touching on now about individualism in modern day society is very important. And one of the lessons that I received while being there in the monasteries and so on is perhaps quite counterintuitive, and that is that limitation is sometimes freedom. So I wonder if you could speak a bit more about that and develop that idea, because you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that when we have this summer program and have about like 80 and sometimes to 100 of young people, okay, and they all love freedom, okay, and are also very independent and critical thinking. But when we put all these people together, especially when we live in I think Pablo, you came when we have the program in mainland China, in China. And we have to face in that environment. It's very sensitive about religion. It's very sensitive about foreigner as well. And I think the security and safety for our student were the priority for us. So I think that how can we kind of keep the balance between the individual freedom and then also the teamwork. And, when we live it, during that, that event, that program, remember that we always, if some of our students violate, the boundary, they, kind of wandering around and not coming back. And when they come back, we have like a class meeting without the staff, attendant. So we let people to think about how can we find the balance between individual freedom and also like a teamwork. I mean, many of our students, you live in maybe in the dormitory and then go to the class, really not really living in a very what I call the discipline, the community, but especially when you are put into other culture. For example, if you are living in America, nobody's really, for example, like a midnight, you have party, people probably just say, okay, we understand. But when you put yourself or the whole group in a different culture, and that's the reality of our society. So I think that we all learn from that, and I think that can train our students to be even more aware about the diversity, of the culture in the different country. I think that, but in Buddhism, I think it's very important. It's emphasized on your mental, spiritual freedom, not that much. Hopefully, through your physically discipline, and you can attain your spiritual freedom. I mean that many people, hate like rules and law. In Buddhism, we call precepts. Okay, but thinking about it, I mean, those people lose their freedom. Are those people violate the law, or even break the precept and make them not free, no freedom. So I think this is very important to keep, individuals' freedom, and then also kind of a public life. So this is what we Buddhism talk about, like a self-karma and collective karma. Okay, and so I think that the mental spiritual freedom is more important than just we think about like a physical freedom.
Okay, and the other question that I had, which you touched on a bit, is one of the biggest challenges today for the whole of humanity, if not the biggest challenge, is climate change. So I wanted to ask you, how does humanistic Buddhism engage with environmentalism and climate justice, and what can it contribute to the global efforts in this direction?
Yeah. Okay. I think that I probably touch upon a little bit on like a consumerism. And of course, if you look at all kinds of the data and information, I don't think I have to spend too much time. And basically right now that people are very much aware about that lavish life is going to create a more the pollution and burden on our earth. That means rich people, for example, rich people go to the space, just one trip, space traveling, it could produce those pollution probably equal to the country like Afghanistan or Bangladesh. Okay, so I think that we are not saying everybody have to go to the poverty, but I think that we have to think about it. What is the lavish life and good quality of life, and to be more consider that not just for yourself. I always say that we are create. We always say we all create equally. I always joking about that, things, we human beings are created just have one mouth and one stomach. If we have a more stomach or more mouth, then some people, the desire even bigger, And so if we consider every day, from the food, from the clothes, from living condition, we really don't need that much. Of course, we need a good quality, but our society sometimes too much emphasis on the lavish life. When I was in mainland China, and frankly, I was kind of disappointed because everybody always thinking about to become like the biggest enterprise, like a 500, the enterprise. That's their goal, and very materialist, And so I think that the kind of a gap between the rich and poor. And now I want to, throw some of the teaching philosophy from Buddhism. The first one we talk about, collective karma. Our environmental is really a good example for collective karma because we all live on this earth. And sometimes you live in this country, you think that will be nothing to do the other country, but that is not true. Now, right now, we can all see that we are affected by the people even living in other the area. So this collective karma, in Buddhism, we call, you have a self karma. That means individual karma, you're doing something, maybe it affect yourself immediately, but also remember that individual karma will become the collective karma. Okay, and the secondly, I think that this like a vicious circle, we call samsara. Samsara, or many people have heard that samsara, literally means a vicious circle. So our action will affect our environment. That it's a for sure. So in February, I gave a lecture in UC Santa Barbara, and the first one, of course, I'm a religious person, so I speak it from a religious perspective. The first one, I think that the religious leader or religious community really can do a lot of contribution to environmental issue. Why? Because these religious leader always have a big congregation. And then if we educate the religious leader, then they can educate their members and congregation, their community. So I think this is very important. However, though, sometimes I find that even though I myself am involved with all this kind of interface dialogue and talking about environmental, and frankly, many times I feel it's kind of talk too much. Yeah. So I would say we have to walk the walk and talk the talk. Okay. So talk the talk and walk the walk. And so I, within Buddhism, I just mentioned, kind of give a several example about what we shouldn't do to the environment. Sometimes, like for example, in Buddhism, we will release the animal creature like a fish, turtle, but always put into the wrong ocean, wrong area. For example, there was a case in Beijing that they released the wild foxes. The people, they think that they released this life, but those are foxes, like kill all the chicken, and the farmer killed the fox, fox. So I think that we need to give, first one, we need to have a religious leader to have education, good education, right education about how to, correctly help with the environment. We need education. And a lot of things we think in Buddhism, I see it's a lot of rituals. For example, I saw there was a nuns and carry like tons and tons of, bottled water. They go out the sea. They're doing the chanting, and then they put the water into the ocean. They say they want to purify the ocean. And it's really, it's just contradictory to the environment. You create a lot of plastic, the bottle. So bottles. So I think that we need to educate the religious leader, right understanding what is the really the right way, because the right action, right understanding, right, action, and then from the leader to educate the congregation and community. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the questions I had prepared.
Yeah.
Now the audience can participate if they want. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, or if we want to speak more about something that we did already, and so on. And I can help translate if someone doesn't feel comfortable asking in Spanish. We have a question from Javi, right? Mm-hmm. So he's asking, in humanistic Buddhism, what kinds of activities, specific activities, do they do to serve society?
Okay, I think that in traditional Buddhism, that you come to the temple, worship the Buddha, what we call doing the chanting meditation. So that is what we call Dhamma function. But in humanistic Buddhism, as of course, people talking about this humanity, the definition of humanity. So we really don't know whether this humanistic Buddhism, the humanistic is right translation. However, that okay, as I mentioned, it's more like a social engaged Buddhism. So what happened is, besides this traditional meditation and chanting, that some of the temple, they started to, for example, involve with the charity, building the hospital, and then even involved with recycling the trash, and also with more building schools, universities, secular school. For example, in Taiwan, it's so small, has about like 23 million population, but already have 7 university funded by the Buddhist temple. And this university are teaching medicine, technology, science, or like a social study. So like a secular university. And they also have a TV station, newspaper. And I remember that the temple I joined long time ago, we were started like, older women love to play mahjong, gambling. And then the temple invite, kind of established called women's club, okay, but teach them Buddhism and teach them flower arrangement, all kinds of cultural, and give the kids, calligraphy. So they are not just limited only teaching Buddhism, but basically it's a function as a community center. So this is what really what we call the humanistic Buddhism, develop. And for those temple, they kind of break through traditional practice and engage more what we call the social charity or cultural education, or like a campus education, like a university education. And this organization and become the major and mainstream of the Buddhist organization in Taiwan. Yeah. So this is what we call the humanistic Buddhism. It's not just, in like a counter traditional, like a reclusion, a kind of isolate yourself, but, on the contrary, to do more like a social engaged or in social engagement. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think adding to that, in the past decades, engaged or socially engaged Buddhism has been really pushing forward training in peace and in mediation.
Yes.
And I think that's really another way to give to society. And I remember. Oh, yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that when I was staying with Venerable Yifa in 2018, a fight developed within the monastery, and I was quite struck because the Chinese volunteers at the temple, I remember specifically how, in the face of someone trying to punch them, they dropped to their knees and pled to stop fighting. And it's something I would have never done, and it's something I would have never advised someone to do. But surprisingly, it worked, and it worked at several levels. I think superficially, of course, it stopped the fight, but then it worked at a much deeper level of really putting an end to the cycle of violence. And engaged Buddhists in the past decades have been quite famous for, that will of self-sacrifice, that bodhisattva vow for social peace, not only their own peace, but everyone's peace. So, yeah.
Well, when you talk about, the peace, I think that in Buddhism, emphasizes so much on inclusive, and then also like endurance. So if you go to Taiwan right now, you will find very interesting that the Buddhism and Taoism harmoniously kind of almost like a mingle together, And so I remember that now I'm at Harvard, and I'm on the Professor James Robson's class, and then when we talk more about, also cover his class also cover Confucianism and Taoism, and my reaction is, I also practice Taoism, and my education, if you know that especially in Taiwan, that our education when we were young, we started Confucianism. So I always say myself, it's a multi-religion, Confucianism and Taoism and Buddhism. I think that we all have multi-value. It's not just one. And so, for example, this is kind of a pre-announcement or tell. The issue is, for example, that Professor Robson and I would realize that there was no Taoist religion study in United States, the university, none, zero. No university in United States has the Taoist religion or religious Taoism, study. So I told James, I said, hey, in Taiwan, the Taoism, because Taoism have the philosophy and have what we call the religion, the practice they worship, or more we call folk religion. So they worship all kinds of goddess. I said, this is a Chinese civilization. This is Chinese culture, and too bad that we just think it's just a faith or it's just a worship. We should make it a study. So in Taiwan, the richest people in Taiwan, the first one is the FASCOM, the founder of FASCOM. He is the Taoist, religious Taoist. He worship Guanggong. He worship the Taoist, Maju. The second one is the Taoist. What's that? The EVA airline and Evergreen Cargo. The founder of these two enterprises, also Taoist follower. So I think that I told James, I said, hey, you know what? I will help you. Maybe I should go back to Taiwan doing some fundraising, and we should come to Harvard to set like a religious Taoism study center. And his reaction is, but you are Buddhist. You are Buddhist now. Why are you doing the fundraising for Taoism? Well, I think this is a human civilization. It's a human, the wisdom, and we are not just going to limit, I'm only doing for Buddhism. I think for the human goods, it's all worthy. Yeah. Okay. So, and more question?
Let's see if people decide to ask. Si alguien no sabe cómo pronunciarlo en inglés, puedo ayudar a traducir.
Can they understand my English?
I hope they do.
I have a...
No, it's good. Yifa, your English is very good. Okay, stop. Oh yeah, Patricia says they do.
Okay. I was joking. I have this kind of a Chinglish, and then my friend always say like, no, you have a Yifa's accent. Because I came to United States to study that, I was over 30, over 30 years old. Yes, yeah.
Mm. Okay, yeah. Javi has another question.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what is the main difference and similarities between Taoism and Buddhism?
Oh, well, I think that we always said that there was three major philosophy really kind of influence the Chinese, what we call the Chinese culture. One is Confucianism. The other one is Taoism. And third one is Buddhism. So in Chinese, we always call 儒释道. And then if you live in this kind of environment, I think that mean, I have to say that before the communism, came to China, that basically you growing up in the Chinese culture, these are the major three, philosophy. And in fact, your life value, and also the politics as well, and the whole society. So I think that Confucianism is emphasizing very much how you deal with your life, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your boss. At that time, we call the emperor, and so so that for example, Confucianism say, 敬鬼神而远之. Okay, keep far away from these ghost spirits. Never mention about the something you don't see it. Okay, and don't talk about that. Focus on your life. 不知生焉知死. Just deal with your life. However, the Taoism philosophy, what I mean with the philosophy, for example, people will read the text on 道德经, or people call 老子, and also 庄子. So these are more like a philosophy. I think that it balanced the Confucianism. Like you are very aggressive in the society, but the Taoism is kind of pull you back to look at it, that how can you doing what we call the non-action. Indeed, non-action, it doesn't mean you should not have any action at all. It's more like nowadays we call like a small government. Okay, and or you don't always calculating the benefit before you take any action. So it's called 无为. It doesn't mean that you don't have an action or non-action. It doesn't mean you don't have a physical action. It's very important. It's you have to try to harmonize with the society, harmonize with the nature. Okay, so I think that from Confucianism and Taoism, is already pushed the people kind of upper, not just focus on the secular, but kind of more with the nature. And the Buddhism, the Buddhism is a kind of push it further. You are not just dealing with this life, this society, but you also have to transcend it. So in Buddhism, we have a so-called the sixth path. That means that you have not just a human being, animal, but you also have a health, heavenly being, and hungry ghosts. That means all the spirits, and ashra. Ashra is kind of a one kind of a spirit. So in Buddhism, that on the time and space, you are not just focused on this life. You always talking about past, present, and the future. And the space, it's not just talk about human being, not like a Confucianism. The human is the center. Okay, so it's kind of covered even beyond just a human realm. So he talked about like a heavenly being. And so I think, but Taoism also, what should I say? It's not really directly to do with the 道德经 or 庄子, not directly from the Taoist philosophy, but more like a folk religion. So if you want to accurate to say what is the religious Taoism, maybe the best way to put it is a folk religion. So that means in Chinese, the practice, religious practice, there was one of the mainstream that Buddhism, the Chinese people believe that everyone will not just die. They still have the soul or the energy and will exist in our society, especially for those heroes, those good person. After they die, their soul and their energy will protect our society. So this is what we call the folk religion. And in Chinese folk religion, you have all kinds of deities. So for example, the people, they worship so-called the earth god or the ocean, goddess, or many of the, especially one of the very popular is the hero who died. And then after he died, he become, the worship object. And all of like a business people will worship that because he emphasized on righteousness. That means 义气. That means the kind of promise, the brother bond. So this is and so when I mentioned about religious Taoism or folk religion, they also have all kinds of practice and theory behind them. But unfortunately, in our society, we just put them as kind of for people who are illiterate and just a worship. But I think that they also have many philosophy behind them. Yeah, and in Taiwan, the people went to folk religions, the temple, and people went to the Buddhist temple. And for example, the family I growing up, in my family, the living room center, my parents from my grandma and grandpa, they enshrine, like a folk religion, the ocean goddess, Maju, and in front of them, they put a Sakyamuni Buddha statue. So they are harmony, living together. And the people, they can worship both. Yeah. Is that too long to answer?
No, that was, at least to me, that was very interesting.
Yeah.
And I think it's very hard for Christian cultures to understand that other idea of kind of a flexible identity and a flexible practice.
Yes.
Not only ascribed to one very specific religion, which is super differentiated from the others.
Well, if I may, I kind of believe that I kind of attended to Yuval Harari. I remember one of his lecture, he mentioned that, I don't know, some people may be, against him, but I think that he mentioned that, so-called the religion, indeed, it's our individual religion, self-religion. For example, that my grandma will call herself also a Buddhist. But of course, she also worshipped all kinds of folk religion, but if I myself and my grandma, we all call Buddhists. But when we are entered to the temple, the Sakyamuni Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, to her is a savior. Like my grandma will ask many things, blessing, health, fortune from Sakyamuni Buddha. But for me, also as a Buddhist, and we worship at the same object, but I would say, well, the Sakyamuni Buddha is my teacher for my life value, my philosophy teacher, and guidance. I don't think that the Buddha is my savior, will bring my health and the fortune to me, or I need his protection. But it's more like I will follow his teaching and finally to attain the enlightenment. And so even though that my grandma and I, we all call Buddhists, but indeed in our mind, the recognition of Buddhism are very different. So I think that I tend to kind of agree with what does mean about religion means, even though in our society, we tend to use, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian. We have all this term kind of define ourselves, but indeed, that's not true. Even we think we call Buddhism, we say, okay, how many population of Buddhists in the world. Yeah. But I don't think that even you call Buddhism or Buddhists, it's a, your recognition or you believe are the same. So it's more like what does it mean about, so now you may ask me, so, okay, Yifa, what's your religion? I would say, okay, I'm a Buddhist nun. I enjoy this kind of monastic life because life is very simple and very economic because I don't have to worry about my hairdo. I don't have to worry about, my clothes. I love this kind of, life, and I don't have to, have a relationship or have the children, have family, and I like to be alone. But my education, I studied, when we were young, we were, asked to memorize Analak, the Confucian, the text. So we grow up in this kind of value of Confucianism. And then Taoism affected me a lot. So I also kind of used the quotation from Tao Te Ching, and then Buddhism. So I would say I have a multi-faith. If you treat Confucianism and Taoism as a faith as well, I would say it's more like a life value and life philosophy for me. And with my education, and especially also influenced by Western education, I'm also somehow different from the monks and nuns living in mainland China. For example, to do with LGBT, homosexual, gay issue, I think that I tend to be think that they have the right and they need to have the respect. And of course, the people will argue there was in Vinaya that the Buddha will prohibit, the gay people to join order. And by my argument will be, okay, you have to look at the text, not just that section or the conclusion. You have to look at the context, the social environment. So for me, I think that the Sakyamuni Buddha, he is very, in the secular level, conventional level, he is very much compromised with the ruler, the society. So, but if you look at all this, like a Vinaya, his lifestyle, his interaction with the disciple and with the society, you find that pattern. So if you take this pattern to the 21st century, and my argument will be that the Buddha, if he lived in the 21st century, the Buddha will be the one who argued for the women's equality, of course, racial equality. He already, kind of break through because he allowed the 4 castes join the order, and also with the gay issue, and the democracy. So I think that, and I will make this kind of argument, but when I am in Taiwan's, or Taiwan, or especially in China as a Buddhist community, their attitude toward gay will be, in general, very conservative, very conservative. Yeah. So I think that we should not just limit it, say, okay, I'm a Buddhist, I'm Catholic, I'm a Christian. I think that I have quite a few Catholic nuns, and even Muslim friends, even closer than the Buddhist friends. So I think it's very important, not just because this appearance, this terminology or category. We have to look at it, what is really, the substance, the essence, what we believe. So I personally, I also encourage the interfaith dialogue, interfaith, community. And maybe you also see recently that in China, unfortunately, the Chinese government tried to tear down some of the mosques in Yunnan. That's too sad, Or some Buddhists also feel the threat from Muslim, but not all of Muslim are very aggressive. And many of them are just kind of their culture, their ethnicities belief. I believe that some of the Chinese Muslim, they are also different from maybe in the so-called the Muslim country or in the Middle East. They call Muslim, but they still have some different belief. For example, the Muslim in China, they worship the ancestors too. So I think that when we come to religion, global religion, indeed the content, it's very diverse. It's not just the way we study, put the category, okay, Muslim, Buddhist, and then Christian, Jewish. But I think very important, it's, we are all human. This is the most common ground. Or with the animal, we are all sentient beings. And then we live in this earth. I always say the world is so big, but the earth is so small. Yeah. If you put in the universe, this what do you call it, the cosmos, like you cannot even find where we are. Yeah. So if you look at it from this perspective, it just I find really, there are many people with delusion and then the hatred and greed against other people. What? Okay.
No, yeah. Thanks for that. I think there is such immense value in interreligious dialogue. And, the fact of acknowledging that, other people are right about many things, not only your own tradition and yourself. And there's so much to learn from the other. And at the end of the day, does the idea of love, not only the idea, but the practice of love or compassion or equality belong only to Christianity or only to Buddhism? Or at the end of the day, they are human values. And, they might be modeled differently in different traditions, but it all derives from that same feeling, that same nature, which is being human. And we should all be pushing in the same direction and learning from the others. Because as you say, we do live in a society. We don't live in our own ghetto of our own categories, but we live together.
Yeah.
So we should be putting effort into understanding each other. And when I talk about interreligious dialogue, I always think back to one of the first one of the first Western missionaries in China, the companion of Matteo Ricci, and he was Diego de Pantoja, right? And so he writes in his book that when he first got there, the Chinese people were not used to his long beard and his blue eyes, right? So what he says is that the Chinese were amazed at his blue eyes, and they told him that with those blue eyes he could find many riches, and they said that they could find the hanzi, the Chinese characters, in his eyes, which is of course an exaggeration on Pantoja's side, definitely, of course. But I think, through that process of seeing the other, and you believe that the other's eyes can find so many riches, and there's so much knowledge inside what the other can see, that it's through that process of recognition and understanding each other that we might get to something.
Okay. So, yes.
Yes. I don't know if anyone else has any questions. Alejandro asks, how do you think Buddhism can help to improve people's life quality? What Buddhist practices would you recommend to people who have not had contact with Buddhism before to improve their life quality?
Okay, the first one, I think that Buddhism, well, we always call Buddhism is a inner learning. That means Buddhism is not just accumulate a lot of knowledge, but more like an exam your own mind. So this is very important. So right now in our daily life, our eyes, ears, nose, the sense organ always like a tour outside, especially right now that with all this media, we have a YouTube, social media, and in the future we're going to have AI. And now you go to the YouTube, you have all kind, you almost can know everything in this world. But sometimes you also find a lot of things, it's kind of a garbage. It's not really important for your life quality. So I think it's very important. What I want to say is take a good care of your mind and your spirit. And by doing that, it's kind of a always keep it exam. When we got sick, we go to the doctor to do the like an exam. But also when we get when we are how should I say, like a physical body get dirty, then we take a shower. But when our mind get dirty, that means that we have a lot of anxiety, depression and unhappiness or hatred and greed. What should we do? If the body get dirty, we can take a shower. But how about when our mind get dirty? What should we do? I think it's a kind of to turn inside, turn to yourself, and to you should look at it and like check it. I think this is very important for Buddhism to say. Buddhism is the way of inner learning. Take care. Make sure that your mind, your consciousness, your spirit are healthy. That's that it's a very important. And the secondly, that the Buddhism is not teaching you knowing, but realization. I always say the knowing and realization are very different. For example, especially for addict, like you have an addiction. Everybody always know, like use drug or alcoholic, it's no good, or smoke, it's not good. But it's no good. But if you only know it, you cannot get rid of that addiction. The only, you can go to interview people. You find out the people who can really cut it off, the addiction, is because they have a realization. They realize if, I don't turn around and I keep going to have a drug and I will die. It's only have this kind of realization. So I think it's very important that when we talk about meditation, you don't just talk on the text, say meditation. You should sit down and then your body change, your mind change, and you realize. So what in Buddhism is different from secular knowledge. It's deal a lot about yourself, your mind. Because if you, I always tell my students and my devotees, I said, you need to take care of yourself. If you are healthy, physical, especially mentally health, then we don't have to worry about you. Okay. And then you can help other people. Just like in the airplane, they ask you to put an oxygen mask yourself in order to save your kids. So in Buddhism, called benefit yourself and benefit to other people. And I always told our devotee, I said, don't donate all your money. If you become the homeless, we still need to give you charity. You have to take care of yourself. So I think this kind of what we call the inner learning. And the secondly is a realization. It's just you don't accumulate all kinds of knowledge. If you have a realization inside, and then that can really help you to see much clearer, or even put the action into it. And I think that also very important, it's I come to realize that this so-called desire. In our society, there's so much emphasis on rich, lavish life, successful, and not to recognize that individuals are different. Sometimes I was joking when we talk about individualism, but we also have lots of what we call the fashion and trendy, and not really, self-independent at all. Always follow the trend. So if people want to do this and become rich, everybody pursue the money. But I think that as at the beginning I mentioned that we all, what we want is greater than what we need. So Buddhism always emphasized, like, right now there was a term called decluttering, get rid of detachment, get rid of things that are unnecessary. And I think that will improve a lot of life quality. I have a book I mentioned, start from junk food. Okay. We eat a lot of things. The body doesn't need it. And junk mail. And right now we have the junk social media. And we have a junk relationship too. This kind of, for example, domestic violence, it's a samsara. It's a vicious circle. But it's a junk. But you just cannot leave that environment. And then finally, we have a lot of junk thought. Excuse me. We have a lot of junk idea, junk thought, incorrect view, and not the right understanding. And that will lead in kind of more like a cell, destruction. Yeah. So that is why Buddhism talk about right view, right understanding. It's the wisdom and very important. Yeah. So I think I believe Buddhism has a lot. Buddhist philosophy has a lot to offer, but you don't have to call yourself Buddhist. And so for Pablo, you joined our summer program. And I would say that it's the education program. It's not conversion program. We don't have to be, people call themselves, okay, I'm a Buddhist. I think it's more important that we have a more healthy people, and right view people on this earth. It's more than like we have a big population of a Buddhist. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We have time for one last short question and a quick reply.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Should I look at it? Mm-hmm.
Alejandro says thank you.
Okay. Pablo, did you mention that our summer program you are coming to?
Yes, I mentioned the summer program.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
Oh, Julián, creo que tienes el micrófono apagado.
Yeah.
Ahora.
Well, thank you, Venerable Yifa. That has been quite interesting. And I just would like to know, what is your opinion about the Buddhism in the young generation in Europe, for instance? How do you foresee? I mean, you compare for sure Asia, where you had a long tradition about Buddhism, but What about in other cultures, like in the Western countries?
You mean do you know my generation? I'm 64 years old now.
Yeah, well, I am 80.
So you want to ask me about? I think that very interesting that the Western, they study Buddhism. Let me tell you, about 100 years ago, that in Chicago, I think that was 1893, that Chicago has so-called the Parliament of World Religion. Okay, at that time, it was tried to. I was told that they was, indeed was the, Catholic, the church. They tried to have a ecumenical movement among the Christianity. However, at that time, a more other beyond just Christian that joined, include Buddhism. Okay, so at that time we have the monks that come from Japan.
Yeah.
Also have monks that come from Theravada, and also have monks that come from Tibetan tradition. Okay, so and unfortunately during that time, that China is still very close, like a Qing dynasty is very close society. So unfortunately, the Chinese Buddhism, or what we call Mahayana Buddhism, has not yet reached the Western. So even right now, that we don't see much of a so-called Han tradition. When I mean Chinese tradition or Han tradition, I mean that the canon, the Buddhist canon are written in Chinese. So that would be what we call the Han tradition, or Chinese tradition. Of course, this Chinese tradition also went to the Japan and Korea. Okay, so and Buddhism went to come to the West, include America and Europe, are mostly affected by so-called the Japanese Zen, like a D.T. Suzuki. And then also, and later, I think the Theravada Buddhism is talking about the insight meditation, vipassana meditation. It's more popular. So in general, what I'm try to say that's and of course the Tibetan Buddhism is because of Dalai Lama's position. His political position, because the media exposed that the Tibetan Buddhism also kind of popular in the West, American and European. So the way I see that the Buddhism in the West, so even right now, is kind of a step by step. In the early time, you can see that a lot of the Christian missionary, they encounter with the Buddhism. So during that time, that translation of the Buddhism material, for example, we don't call sutra, we call Buddhist Bible. And many of the translation are kind of used term of a Christian. Okay, that's a kind of a beginning. Of course, there are some individual, I won't be able to kind of give you, there was the people are like an individual and really are the like a leader in the European or in the American society. But that's the kind of the trend. And nowadays, in the West, when I mean West, it's American and also European, in the English language or Western language. Right now, there was a movement we call mindfulness, or originally it's called Vipassana meditation. And then what now we call mindfulness, movement. I think this is an effect, from the Japanese Zen tradition, about Zen. And then now you come to more like from Theravada tradition, focus on mindfulness or Vipassana, insight meditation. However, though, the way I see it, Buddhism for the Westerner or in the Western society is still kind of a far away from what we call the Buddhism, because the Buddhist Dharma, the teaching, Buddhist philosophy, and recorded in the so-called the Buddhist description, description, that means the sutra, or what you call Buddhist Bible, Buddhist sutra. But you find the Western, they call Dharma teacher, or people who teach Buddhism rarely quote from sutra. Okay, for example, you hardly to hear that they quote from Heart Sutra or Diamond Sutra, Vipassana Sutra, or Nirvana Sutra. And they was just like you teach Christian, but never quote from Bible. So I think this is from Buddhist. You try to propagate the Dharma. From my view, that if you don't study Buddhist scripture, you don't study Buddhist philosophy. You're sitting there just with the eye closed, and right now we call it mindfulness. It's more for the therapeutical, function, but you cannot really change the individual's inside, their mind, their consciousness, their wisdom, but always, kind of depend from the outside. So I think that so we in Buddhism, 3 major learning is called morality, ethics, concentration, and the wisdom. So I think that right now Buddhism in the West only kind of a test about meditation, mindfulness, Vipassana. Okay, but as I mentioned, the self-discipline, because the Western thing, my student always tell me that we don't like to hear discipline. We don't like to hear, precept, but morality. How can we make how can we create a healthy relationship among our community, especially for yourself? As I, before I mentioned that, you need to have a self-discipline, then you can become a completely, freedom person. You don't want to just free to kill people and then end up in jail. So the morality is important. The meditation concentration is important, but the wisdom, I think the, Buddhist wisdom is not just, like accumulation, a lot of knowledge, but it's really, preached by the Buddha and recorded in all this, what we call the sutra. For example, meditation, what kind of effect and the way you see the world, it's all recorded in this, what we call the sutra. But right now, if the Western Buddhist teacher, they don't study Buddhism. They don't study sutra, Buddhist sutra. Just like a Christian, they never teach it. They never quote from Bible, but they just say, "Oh, you have to love your neighbor. Oh, you need to have love." And in Buddhism right now, we just say, "Oh, life is suffering. Okay, you need to be compassionate." Okay, but never get into the deeper philosophy and wisdom of what is the in the sutra. And I can tell you that the Buddhist sutra even vaster than the Bible. A lot of sutra. And kind of in my bag, this is the some of the sutra. A lot. Yeah. So I what next step I want to I've been kind of planning to see I can come up with, you know what? There was a Japanese organization called Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai. They already translated from the Chinese canon into English, and it's going to be 100 the sutra. And so now one of my proposal I want to do is really to at least select 100 the Buddhist sutra, the Bible, the Buddhist Bible, the sutra. And if you want to become the Dharma teacher, the Buddhist preacher, a teacher, you have to study. Yeah. So I find that the sutra education is not enough. It's very common in the Western Buddhism.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Yifa, for your time and your wisdom. And thank you very much to everyone who joined today. And that should be it for today.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.